let's see. I forget if Teams tells us that the meeting's being recorded or not. Or is it, are we going?
Lilas is shaking her head, so.
Okay. All the different formats, I never can remember which one does what.
Ready to go when you are.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Budget Advisory Commission to order. And I'd like to, I'd like to acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship of the land on which we live. With that, we'll go ahead and start roll call, please.
Okay. Chair Rodriguez.
Present.
Vice Chair King.
Present.
Ms. Brawley.
Here.
Ms. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Hobson.
Here.
Ms. Hotch is excused. Mr. Clouda.
Here.
Ms. McConnell.
Here.
Mr. Minor.
Here.
Mr. Smallwood.
Here.
Okay. Everyone is here. Thank you.
Excellent. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda if everyone's had a chance to look at it?
This is Lizzie. Motion to approve.
I'll second. This is Anna.
Thank you, Anna. All right, with that, I don't see that we have any action items. So with that, we'll just go right into the assembly report.
I'm going to see if Mr. Perez-Berdia was able to join us. Miss Assemblymember LaFrance had a prior commitment. Cameron, are you on, sir? Okay, I don't see you there. And how about Desiree? Is Desiree on? All right. Madam Chair, I'm gonna pinch hit for these folks and just tell you there's, I think, 4 items on the relevant to the Assembly's actions that you might want to know about. I'm going to cover 2 of them in my presentation. The first one is the Assembly has approved the first quarter budget revisions. They did that on April 27th. They had a couple amendments that were approved by the Assembly, and so the administration is incorporating those. The other thing that the Assembly has done is at the 27th meeting, they set the mill rates for 2021. And after the mill rates were set, there was a recognition that an adjustment needed to be made. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The Assembly had a special meeting on May 3rd, which was Monday. And I will go over what that adjustment entailed and why it was being considered. It was brought up by a member of Girdwood, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the whole point of it was to provide some fairness and equity among all area-wide property taxpayers. So that's why the administration proposed it, and that's why the Assembly was looking into it. The 2 other items on the Assembly agenda, one of them is an ordinance and a resolution related to offering the Anchorage Community Development Authority, ACDA, $2 million to support some activities inside their business. And so there was an ordinance and Assembly memorandum introduced on the 13th. Public hearing was held on the 27th. They closed the public hearing, but they did not take action on it. That will be before the Assembly on May 12th. The first Assembly meeting in May, it will be on a Wednesday. Since Election Day is, the special election is held on the normal regularly scheduled Assembly meeting, the Assembly has moved their 11th meeting to the 12th. That item will come up. I will have Lila send you a copy of that document because I know that some members of the BAC have been interested on what's going on with ACDA and the Development Authority. So I'll summarize. Basically, what's going to happen is the administration is proposing to give ACDA a loan to help them primarily with a capital investment commitment that they had with a private developer to put some housing downtown. And so that is the focus of that right there. I don't know a lot about the details. It's pretty much been managed in part by Chris Schutte at Community Development, Economic and Community Development, and the CFO, Mr. Slifka. So, but I will send that information to you. I do expect that will probably be an S version. I don't know what that entails. I heard about that on Monday, but if I know more, I will share more. And if the S version is available, I do it. I point this one out only because I think it was maybe Jonathan or maybe you, Madam Chair, that had some questions about what was going on with ACDA. And so that conversation has been evolving in the last 30 days. So that's number 3 on the Assembly docket. And the fourth one I would mention is the administration and the Assembly are still waiting for the final guidance on the American Rescue Plan Act, which is also going to allow us to do a couple things. There were some programs that we were not able to fully complement or meet the goals with the CARES Act funds. So there's some interest in moving forward on those. And I think how those funds are going to be applied, obviously members of the BAC have had some interest in making sure that, you know, we have some lessons learned, make sure that we don't just recover from where we are, but hopefully end up in a better place than we were prior to, frankly, the recession prior to COVID. So I know that the anticipation is we'll probably get around 100 million. It'll be in 2 $50 million pieces, a part this year. Don't know if the second part comes in this year or if it actually comes in 2022. So I'll, as I learn more about that, and I have some concrete data, I'll share that with you. But I think from an Assembly perspective related to budget, those are the 4 items that I believe Assemblymember LaFrance and or Mr. Perez-Padilla would want you to be aware of. They do have a Assembly Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I believe it is the 20th. I think is their next meeting, May 20th. It's the 3rd Thursday. So anyway, if that any more information comes up from that, that's what's going on with the Assembly reports.
Lance, I have a question. Do you know the timeline that that the Assembly is looking at for the ARPA funds and plans to expend? And I also noticed, Jonathan, I noticed you have your hand up as well.
I'll start. I don't know the answer to that. I know that they are sort of prepping with anticipated guidance on what they think the money's going to be used for and when we expect to see it. Last I had heard, we anticipate to have 2 things before the end of the month. One is the amount and the other is the guidance. And in anticipation of both of those, I think the Assembly is preparing, if not poised, to start applying those funds as soon as possible. So that's as much as I know.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Jonathan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It always takes a second to take myself off mute. I just want to say that I appreciate the Assembly's movement on the ACDA funds. For those who are not aware of this, it's been in the paper recently, but you know, largely through no fault of their own, ACDA's budget and revenues have been deeply affected by COVID. As you can imagine, their revenues are driven by parking downtown. And there was a sudden shift, drop in parking downtown with the onset of COVID and the pandemic, both from people going downtown to dine, but also working downtown. And they have not been eligible for relief funds up until now as a quasi-government agency that, you know, that revenue replacement was not on the table until now. And they are just in a horrific situation where You can't collect, parking is picking up downtown. I was downtown yesterday and I actually had to look for a spot, but you cannot collect revenue if people aren't renewing their permits because they don't believe you're going to be there. You cannot collect revenue if your meters are broken, and you can't repair any of those things unless you have people to repair them with, and you can't have people hired to repair those things unless you have operating funds. So an infusion of cash is desperately needed to keep ACDA going. They will run out of money in July, and a loan is appropriate. This is an organization that once downtown recovers, will start to see revenue flow again. And so I just want to say appreciate the Assembly's movement on that. I hope that they will take action on that because this is a core agency in downtown, and Anchorage needs this. I mean, it's just sort of a flat out we need to do this. So thank you, and thank you to Lance for the update. I really greatly appreciate the update because it feels like it's been a little radio silence in that area.
Absolutely. Thank you for the comments, Jonathan.
And just to direct people to the chat, Lindsay, I think you just posted an article about ACDA, and we have some comments from Anna and Carla. Carla has a question. Why wasn't something done any earlier? Any comments on the timing, perhaps?
I will try, Carla, but I have not been in. I think there was conversations about two things. One, as Jonathan mentioned, the ability to use CARES funds or other funds basically was not afforded to them because they're quasi-governmental. And they are basically a self-supporting institution. It would be like a utility. We couldn't really use tax dollars, or we should not use tax dollars, maybe as a loan, but we can't offer tax relief, can't apply property taxes to ACDA like we wouldn't do it for solid waste or the port. They're self-sustaining. The third part is that we were looking at a variety of options initially, but they weren't coming to fruition, for lack of a better explanation. So they have two issues going on with ACDA, and I think Jonathan explained them pretty well. They have a capital need, and then they have an operating need. So I think it's not been a surprise. It's just that the solution has been difficult because we don't have a lot of options to help them. And so hopefully this loan option would help them with that right now. So that's as much as I can offer. Thank you for the question, Carla.
Nolan, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I'm curious. Is there any sort of strategic planning effort that's going to go on with ACDA, or it seems like they're at kind of the strategic point where they have some decisions to make about future directions, projects, what they're doing. I mean, I would hope that some big picture consideration is going on along with the loan, if it goes through.
Through the chair, I will add. So I know that they have a strategic plan, and I know their strategic plan has changed. So, but to Nolan, I don't know off the top of my head what the adjustments have been, but it's certainly something that we can get and share. So, and the only reason I know that is I think Mr. Halcrow had mentioned that when they proposed their 21 budget, they had to make a lot of changes. And then they were making some changes not only in their personnel, but in their expense and their revenue projections. If that was a reaction to the economics, or if that was a design from a new strategic plan. So, and if I can just maybe divert for just a minute, Lila and I are having a little bit of camera problem here. All we're seeing is one little piece. It may be that I have to jump out and jump in. So if you can excuse me for a minute, Madam Chair, please allow us to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it. Jonathan, did you have a comment while we're letting Lance and Lila?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just answered Nolan's question. They are working really hard to right themselves, but this is one of those situations where the ship has multiple holes below the waterline, and you've got to keep the ship from sinking before you can do the strategic pivot. They have two new board members, Leslie Rydell, who used to be, I believe she was Commissioner of Administration, and Sheldon Fisher. And so I am encouraged that if we can get them through this crisis as downtown picks up, that they will be able to pivot, especially given the quality of the new board member appointments. I mean, these, Mr. Fisher and Ms. Rydell are frankly some of the most talented executives in the state, and having them on that board is a really good addition. So I think we have an emergency surgery situation, and once the patient is stabilized, then we can talk about then the pivots would come. But I think that's really kind of where they are right now.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. And I wanted to both acknowledge and give some time maybe to Carolyn Hall to introduce yourself. I forgive me for not giving you time earlier. And then I want to recognize your question about if it's appropriate to ask Chris Schutte or Alex Slivka to a future meeting. And I think it is. I think that's really appropriate to give us some more information about ACDA. But can you go ahead and tell us about you and do a little introduction for us? My apologies again for missing it earlier.
No problem. I'll keep it brief because I hate being the center of attention, but I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really excited to meet and get to know everybody a little bit better. Some folks on this meeting I'm already familiar with. My background is in communications, video production, and television news. And my husband and I own a video production company. And so that's been really interesting to navigate throughout the course of the last year and what that has meant for our bottom line. And I most recently, over the past few years, have worked in a couple of capacities for the municipality, in the mayor's office and in the clerk's office. Yeah, and I'm really excited to be here and to learn more about this group, and to learn from everybody here too, and just to get intimate with the budget. And my cat apparently wants to make an appearance too. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. We're really excited to have you here. And my apologies, everyone. I thought I was muted, so if there was a lot of babbling, my apologies. But thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. We're really excited to have you with us. Let's see, Lance and Lila, are you guys back with us?
Oh, yeah. Yep, we were only out for about 10 seconds.
Oh. Okay, thanks. All right, well, we will move on to the next item. Are we all wrapped up with assembly report? And shall we head on to the school district? Andy.
All right, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andy Ratliff. I'm the director of the Office of Management and Budget for the school district, and the school district's liaison to the BAC. Also, I saw Carl Jacobs join us as well. As you might know, we had 4 new board members seated Monday, and he was one of them, and he's the school board appointee to the BAC. So if he'd like to introduce himself, that would be great as well, so you guys can get to know him this year. Carl, are you on still?
I am, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be brief. I don't want to interrupt the agenda, and I apologize. It was just a couple minutes late today. My name is Carl Jacobs. I am the new representative for the BAC. I am the current occupant of seat G on the board. I spent my professional career in the field of regulatory enforcement and as an investigator. And my wife, Felicia, and I are licensed therapeutic foster parents, and we're anxious to utilize that experience to help make ASD stronger. And I'm glad to be part of the group and contribute in any way I can. And yeah, thank you so much, Andy, for the opportunity.
Great, thank you. For a quick update on the school district, we're going through the similar process as the municipality with the ARP funding, trying to get that sorted out. We still don't know how much we're going to get. We're expecting it to be in a $100 million range based on what we've heard from the state. I think they're coming out with their allocations here in the next few weeks to districts. So we will have that. And then as far as the allocation process to what we spend that money on, there is a explicit requirement in this ARP Act for school districts to have surveys and community engagement with all the different stakeholders and socioeconomic groups within the municipality to see how that money is spent. So you'll see surveys come out, and the state has the same requirement. So they've already started pushing out their survey through a company called Thought Exchange, if you're familiar with that method of surveying. I don't know if we'll do that, but the state claims that they'll be able to tie responses back to districts. So we will be able to pull some input from their survey, but we'll also do our own, have our own community engagement pieces. There's not a whole lot of stipulations placed on this money for school districts other than, compliant with other educational acts like ESEA. Here's what the money can be spent on. The only real requirement is we need to spend 20% of this money on interventions outside of just the normal instructional time. So that includes summer school, before and after school programs, and I think direct interventions where you're pulling students out and working one-on-one or small group instruction outside of their normal class. But still, we're waiting on guidance for exactly what that might look like. And you'll be seeing more as we really figure it out, because they're kind of in the same boat. State doesn't really know how we can spend it, so they can't really tell us yet, or what the reporting requirements are going to be for it. The previous two stimulus bills didn't really have a whole lot for reporting requirements, but this one is going to have, I think, considerably more work associated with it. So I think that's really all I have for you guys. If you have any questions on school district.
Sorry, I was looking for my raised the hand. Through the chair, Lindsay, I had a question about would that 20% include the, for example, summer meal program through the buses? I mean, is that going to continue, and would that be considered part of that?
I don't know. That's something we'll have to check on, because transportation is not paid for through any of these grants, but the meal programs are actually going to be reimbursable from the federal government. So if we sell meals or like at CEP schools, if the kids take a meal, we can claim reimbursement for it, just like a normal free and reduced type situation. So that's one of the things that the food service may not be as, it's a kind of a different pot of money, but the transportation we'll definitely check on to see if that's going to be an allowable cost as part of summer school, because we do have, for our summer school that we're planning already for this summer with our SURSA Act money, transportation is a component of that to make sure we can get kids to those facilities.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions for Andy? All right, thanks so much, Andy. Really appreciate the update.
Yep, thank you.
And Carl, we really are excited to have you here. I appreciate you giving an introduction and look forward to having you on more of our meetings. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Great to meet everyone.
So I think with that, all right, it's back to Lance for our OMB updates.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. BAC members, get your coffee cup or your beverage of Jolt, whatever it might be, and I'll try to make this as painless as possible, but thank you. I have a couple reports I want to, basically three I would like to share with you. The first one is the year-end budget to actual. So I found out this morning that the controller's office is basically pretty close to closing 2020. But I can tell you that the changes, the findings, the things that they have to do probably will not affect the direct costs or expenses from general government. So my plan now is to provide that year-end fourth quarter report to the Assembly on their May 25th meeting, but I'll give you a quick preview as I see it right now. At a high level, I think all of the departments, and this year has been a little bit challenging because we have to make sure that when we are looking at the year end, how the CARES funds that we have identified that were then applied to first responder payroll. We also had some funds that were appropriated to the health department and to economic and community development that went out through grant programs that were showing up as their budget, and we needed to sort of reconcile that. So after doing that portion, I think what we're going to be at is we'll be close to about 98% spent in 2020, and obviously the revenues that we had projected were down, but we were also able to make up a little bit of those lost in revenues through the reimbursement of first responder payroll, which reduced our expenses to police and fire labor. I think we did have some new departments that were over that I haven't seen before, and they are primarily frankly for two reasons. One, we had a couple departments, mine being one of them. We had an unusual amount of overtime in 2020. I think I had a lot of it to do with kind of getting set up and organized for the CARES funds, and then just working the budget process. But we also had some departments that every year we budget a certain amount of leave cash out for departments. Well, in 2020, there were many departments where the amount of leave that employees would have taken did not take. And so they met the cap on the amount of leave they could keep sort of on the books. And so we had to, in order to maintain that cap, we had to cash them out. And cash out leave is something so I think, anomaly, I think we had a little something from internal audit, maybe something from development services, little hits and bits there. The police and fire department, they, when you look at their approved budget, they overexpended their approved authority. I think a lot of it had to do with overtime, and but those overtime expenses were then reimbursed or covered with CARES Act payroll as they legitimately could have been. So we're balancing that all in. The utilities overall did pretty good. Obviously, AWU's revenues were down extensively, but at the year end, they actually did a little better than they thought they were going to be, and we actually made some adjustments in 21 to reflect that. So as that report gets done, this is kind of information in the last 5 days. Lila and I and my team will put that document together. We'll be getting it to the assembly, and as it's available to them, I'll share it with you. It's a little bit tardy, but last year was a little bit more complicated than previous. So I think overall the departments in their general budget underspent. Their labor was, many departments, the labor was over because of overtime, but overall non-labor was underspent from a variety of areas. So that's what I have to share with the first one, and I don't have anything to show. So if you have any questions on 2020, let me know. And again, I'd hope that I'd have a more definitive answer, but I don't at this time. But we'll here in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Any questions before we move on to first quarter? All right, seeing none. Lance?
Okay, all right. I think what I'd like to do is, we have not had an opportunity to meet as before Lila. I'm going to ask Lila to go ahead and bring up what I'm not going to go through the entire thing because it takes about a half an hour, but I want to highlight. This is a presentation that I gave the assembly on the first quarter budget. So since we met, obviously we had to introduce by code the budget amendments, the proposed budget amendments on April 13th. Then they approved them on the 27th. And so the BAC really didn't have the opportunity to weigh in this year. just the way that we had to roll it out. So, but what I do want to do is I want to show you sort of what the changes were between approved and 1Q. So I'm going to ask Lila just to highlight a couple slides. I'll have her send this to you if I already didn't do it, but I'll have her send it to you. So basically I explained to the assembly kind of how we approved 2020 and some of the highlights, but I'm just going to go straight to, I think it's slide 6 or 7. Keep going, Lila. Keep going. So I'm going to stop right here. So this slide right here basically shows every year when we approved the budget in November, we adjusted in April. And this is kind of an adjustment of how much was either increased or adjusted in 1Q in the first quarter revisions. And so in from approved to first quarter, we added about $6 million into the 2021 budget. And I'll talk about how we got there. Next slide. So one of the things that we do when we build the budget is we go back and we look at any revenue updates, and we get these from Treasury. And I think on the non-tax revenue side, we made some adjustments here. And basically what we were doing here is we added a little bit more of MLMP cash to the 21 budget. And that's where most of these non-tax revenues are coming from. I think we also had some other property or non-property tax revenues that are going to show a little bit of an increase. At almost that 0.9 million or almost $1 million is coming from the room tax. We expect it to recover a little bit better. And then for taxes that were inside the cap, we had a bump in those, which basically reduced the amount of property taxes that we would have to do. And that inside the cap, I think, had to do with contributions from the utilities, from their payment in lieu of taxes, because their net position turned out to be better than we originally budgeted. So the overall amount of property taxes between what was in approved and what we are being proposed is down about 700,000, and that's a combination of property taxes from everything, including the 5 major funds. So the total amount of revenues that we expected from approved to new is about an additional 12 million, and that's all source of funds. So go ahead, Lila. Again, Lila will send this to you, but you can see kind of where the breakdown was, contributions from other funds. That 9 million from MLMP, it actually got reduced in an S version. It's down to about 7.2. We had some other adjustments in there too. And then the trust looks like it's going to be a little better than we had originally projected. The room tax is up. The other thing is we were not projecting a dividend from the new utility of Anchorage Hydro. So we added a little bit of that, and then we had to accommodate revenue sharing going down. And then the services and activities, these are things like transit fares. We expect transit fares to actually be about $1.3 million total down. We also put a break on taxi cab permit revenues, and we also gave a break to development revenues. In total, some of them are up, some of them down, but basically fees and revenues coming in either through direct action, we gave a break, or we don't expect those revenues, so we saw some reductions there. Go ahead, Lila. So these are the adjustments on the revenue side. Again, I talked about the contribution to MLMP, the trust, and the utilities. This is sort of a refinement, reduction from all of the parks. Obviously, the slower opening of facilities for Parks and Rec. The municipal manager, I think that one that's taxi cabs. And then obviously we had some changes. The police department, believe that one has to do with fines and fees coming in. Then we had some miscellaneous. that will show up. And again, we'll also get you a connection to the details of the property or all of the details for the budget. So that's how we got to about the 12 majors from all funds. So go ahead, Lila. This is where we put the expenditures. Obviously, we're going to get a little return on our investment, but we also have an investment expense. Also, we are going to get some improvements in the room tax, but the expenses with that, we have obligations to those that receive the room tax that come from our budget. So that's what that is. We had a lot of contractual increases that were notified. The administration did make an adjustment to the labor for all non-representatives in the municipality that would take effect June 1st. And then included the voter-approved bond debt. We had to make some adjustments in the fleet. We also were made aware that we had 5 individuals that are going to retire. They have a substantial amount of cash out leave. Most of them are $30,000 to $40,000. The departments are pretty small from where those were at, so we increased their budgets and their labor for those one-time expenses. So otherwise, they pay that leave cash out the end of the year, they would have been negative. So if we had the ability to make sure that they ended on budget, otherwise they would have ended budget in negative. And we would have had to true it up at the end of the year. These last ones, if I can remind, the fire and the police. So we added 3 things to the fire department. I'm trying to remember right now. Oh, for the fire department, we gave them a little bit more additional money for EMS, emergency medical supplies. We also upped their budget for a contractual contribution to the Girdwood Volunteer EMS contract services. And then we gave them a little bit money to a tariff they have to pay or fee they have to pay to AWU for water. Police, it's 2 things. One is a contract to the Department of Corrections for the jail contract that we have with them, and then a contribution in non-labor to pay some of their cellular and cell phone pieces. The assembly is a combination of personnel. I think it had to do with some salary adjustments and the increase in one position. And then we added the Prop 4 pass of $1.5 million. It passed at a 1.84 tops. So we added that amount in based on the Prop 4 passing, and then we added in $365,000 to pay for the runoff election happening next Tuesday. So that is where the costs went. Go ahead, Lila. This is a summary page of between the budget and the first quarter. So what was approved in the 21 budget was $550 million total. The first quarter, it goes to 556. You can see the personnel change, and then you can see the property tax going down. And the reason is that we had some increases in revenue that were inside the cap that made the property tax number inside the cap go down. So that's what that is about. This is how the mill rates turned out when in the approved, and these do not change in the mill rate adjustment I'm going to talk about next. But last year when we set the mill rates for all the general government services, it was at 9 mills, which means that's, and when with the proposed adjustment, it's 9.22. That's $22 per $100,000 increase with the new approved general government budget. So basically, last year it was $900 per 100,000. It got increased. Now it's $922 per 100,000. Then the school district, based on what the assembly had passed, they separated the school district's operating mill rate and the school bond debt mill rate. As we are all well aware, the school district's operating budget went up by about 11.11, so it went up $11 per 100,000 just on the operating side. But the school bond debt went up. Basically, last year it was 0.48. This year it's 1.09. That's a 0.61 mils. That's $61 increase, or a difference, which equivalents to a total per 100,000 of $109 is the cost for just the school bond debt reimbursement based on the actions of the legislature. So the difference between last year's tax bill and this year's tax bill is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the column that says difference. So general government's up $22 per 100,000. The school district's up 11. For operating, the total amount of increase is for both the school district and general government is $94. $61 of the 94 is for bond debt. And so that is what we're going to see as an adjustment in the mill rates for 2021 in people's tax bills. There's a lot of variety of things that influence it, that influence the mill levy, but that's generally where we're going. And then for the utilities, we made some adjustments for the dividend from Anchorage hydropower. Obviously, I mentioned a contribution from their cash to general government from the utility fund. The Port of Alaska had a new debt increase that they originally expensed that they weren't anticipating when they approved the budget. We added that in. And then Solid Waste Services, through their work on the expansion for Central Transfer Station and their master plan, they have some finances, some public financing and financing fees. That's some professional services equipment. This was all presented to the assembly as part of the SWS's plan, so we implemented that. And then the water utility, they made some adjustments in their capital program, and these were pretty small adjustments there. And then Merrill Field, they received some coronavirus response grant after we approved the budget, and so we applied what they were going to do with those monies into their capital budget. For the utilities and enterprise, pretty small adjustments. I think on the AWU side, we don't appropriate their revenue, but their revenues are going to look a little better in 2021 than they originally anticipated. So that's generally what happened in the 1Q. Again, we had $15 million or $13 million of expense requests from departments. We were obviously not be able to accommodate that. We built the budget based on the new revenue projections. There was a slight adjustment in the alcohol tax. It went down about 200,000, but we were still within the amount that we had programmed. So the assembly, through this process, they had a few amendments. I don't have a slide, but I will summarize those. In the original budget, we had a full year cost for a new individual in the assembly. Through that process, we know that we don't need a full year cost. They expect that they would start in June. The assembly wanted to add one more position for assembly counsel. So the administration accommodated that one. The other thing is we also, in looking at an original estimate that we had to apply Girdwood, recognizing that for their EMS contract, recognizing that that contract had yet to be signed and that it would not be signed until June 1st. The amount of money we proposed was more than they would need based on that contract. So It was about a $50,000 difference. So we reallocated that 50,000, about half of it to support some planning efforts on the long-range transportation plan for the municipality. The other is to support some planning efforts in Girdwood. On balance, those were the big changes that they had. There was another one. The assembly wanted to move some savings from the alcohol tax to add grants, particularly any savings that we might have had from grants that are not going to be let at the time the assembly considered them, and apply them to a fire department. So after they made the amendment, they didn't identify which grants. And so through some investigation, we found out there were no savings in the grants. So we're trying to figure out a way how to address the assembly's request without the identification of the grant program. So we're working through that one. And I suspect we'll have it all buttoned up here by tomorrow or early next week. But again, members of the BAC, this process is fast-paced is probably not the right word to apply, but the time between when we get the decisions on how much resources we have, the ability to apply and make decisions, get it to the assembly, get it approved in time so that we can set the mill levies, is really all in about a 4-week period, which is a little bit difficult, but that's how we had to roll through this one. That's a lot. And I guess if you guys have questions, please send them to me. And again, Lila will send this presentation to you and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lance. And Lila, thank you in advance for sending the presentation out to everyone. Any questions for Lance?
Carolyn's head's probably swimming. James is like, just what happened? And let's see who else. Anna, and this is a new round for you. So please reach out if you guys have any questions, because it is a lot to digest. And it's the environment we are working in. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't see any questions.
Okay.
So I think with that, let's go ahead and move on to the department reviews, scheduling of the department reviews.
Madam Chair, before you do that, I kind of want to highlight one thing that we did, and if you don't want to hear it, I can share it. It's your call. We did have to make some adjustments in the mill rates, and we had to have a special meeting to do that. And if you are interested to know what we did and why we did it, I can explain it, or I can just share the information with you through a presentation. And then if you have questions, just let me know. How do you want to proceed?
I am interested to hear about that. Let's see, it's about 12:20. I think, looking at the rest of the agenda, I think we have time to go over that if you think that it would fit within our time frame, Lance.
Yeah, I think it's important. So let me just start with, when we set the mill levies, we set mill levies based on service areas that are then applied to tax districts. And I will give as an example. We have service areas like the Anchorage Police Service Area, the Fire Service Area. We have the Eagle River Parks Service Area. We have the Rural Limited Road Service areas up on the hillside. We have 37 separate service areas, and we have 45 different tax districts, and they do not match. And so what we did when we, as a result, when we set the mill levies for area-wide, we discovered, and we applied it correctly, But what we discovered was for those of us individuals that might be in the police and fire service area, those of us in the police or fire service area are actually going to see a benefit in our tax bill because we applied CARES first responder payroll to their cost. So we did not spend as much tax money in police and fire service area. So they ended up with basically a positive at the end of the year. But we also spent CARES funds in area-wide. So through the process of how we did that, our area-wide fund balance ended up in a negative. So for those of us who live in the Anchorage Bowl area, when we see our tax bill, we're going to see, for lack of a better illustration, we're going to see a significant positive, or basically we're not going to be paying for police and fire, but we're going to see a really big payment in area-wide. They sort of offset each other through the calculation process, right? But if you live in an area that's not in police and fire service area and you are still in area-wide, you're not going to benefit from that offset. So your area-wide tax bill is going to look significantly higher than it normally otherwise would because you didn't benefit from that offset. Well, we didn't recognize that after we applied it. So we submitted the mill levies and the budget to the Assembly on the 13th. We went through Assembly review, presentation, public comment, Assembly adoption, and it wasn't until after it was done that this was recognized. There was someone in Girdwood, because frankly, Girdwood was the most significantly impacted because they are not in police or fire. So their area-wide mill rate went up a lot. And after review, we recognized that that really wasn't fair. So what the administration wanted to do was find a way to provide equity in area-wide this one time, just because of the application of the CARES funds, both in area-wide services and in first responder payroll. So we're going to make a manual adjustment to an automatic calculation of the area-wide fund to force, for lack of a better word, some equity in the formula. We really had three choices. We could have left it alone. It would have been, frankly, correct. It would have been legally defensible, but frankly, it wouldn't have been fair. And so we really tried to figure out a way to do that. So when we found out that basically Wednesday of last week, we spent the last 5 days trying to figure out something that was reasonable that we could apply to everyone. And we did that, and then the Assembly held a meeting on May 3rd, and I'm going to explain what we did. So what we recognize is there's probably 12 or 13 tax districts that either are outside the fire service area or they're outside both the fire service and the Anchorage service area. So I'm going to try to make this simple in the next 6 or 7 minutes. So before I go on, are there any questions about what I just said? I can't see hands because I'm showing my screen.
I don't see any hands either, but
okay.
Moment.
And but one of the things that so really Girdwood was the most is going to see the most benefit of this change because without it, they would have, frankly, property owners in Girdwood would have had the most, for lack of a better word, they would have been the most influenced or impacted in a negative way on their tax bill, whereas others are going to receive the benefit. This was totally unintentional, and the disproportionate allocation of the mill levies based on the way in which we applied legally the first responder payroll, this was an unintended consequence. So once we found out, we tried to fix it. And again, it's a one-time fix. So I'm going to ask Lila to jump to the next picture here. again, when we set the mill rates, we set the mill rates to make sure that all of the fund balance in the area-wide, we meet our 10 and our 2. The mill rates were adjusted not just because of the first responder payroll. Obviously, we had some things, if the CARES funds were not in our world and we didn't do any of the application to all of those area-wide programs, including application of area-wide funds to a medical facility in Girdwood to about $5 or $7 million. But we also put money to tourism. We put money to a variety of other things. We did have some lower revenues. All of these things were machinations into the mill rate. So, but again, if you were in the police and fire service area, your mill rates are going to be lower because of the CARES Act funds applied to first responder payroll. But if you are not, you wouldn't have seen that. And so this is what we did. Go ahead, Lana. So when we applied the first responder payroll as guidance by Treasury allowed, we applied almost $37 million of those funds to the fire service area, first responder payroll, which in effect relieved the amount of taxes that we would have applied, and almost $50 million in police. And again, this was just for their payroll. It wasn't for their total amount of expenses. They had some expenses. They had a $100 million budget individually plus, but not everything was eligible. Only that was. So it wasn't available to like the Chugiat Volunteer Fire Service area, or it wasn't applied to the Girdwood Fire Service area. It was only applied to the Anchorage Fire Service and the Anchorage Police. So if you weren't in those areas, you weren't going to see a benefit, but you were going to see the area-wide. So that's why we did it. Go ahead, Lila. Even in the area-wide program, we applied area-wide funds to all of these programs. Many of you are familiar with. You've seen the list before. You know, everything down to the other, everything in that top list is $1 million or more. That influenced the amount of area-wide fund balance and area-wide program. Go ahead. So let me just explain, and I just picked some examples. I could have picked more, but these were some that I shared. This is an illustration of the difference between the service areas and the tax districts, and when we applied it, we weren't thinking about the nuances of the first responder payroll. But here's an example. So the blue on the screen is the police service area. The hatched area is the fire service area. So if you were in a tax district that was either in police, you got the benefit, but were not in fire, you didn't get the benefit. So we had to figure out a way to apply it. And I'll tell you how we did it. So go ahead, Lila. Here's another example. This one's in Anchorage. I think that is, what is 5? I think this is Glen Alps. So basically, Glen Alps is in the fire service, in the police service area, but not in the fire service area. Yes, 56 is Bear Valley. Bear Valley is all in the police service area, but only part of it in the fire service area. So we have to find out which properties are and apply the fix. Couple quick other examples. Go ahead, Lila. This is Viewpoint. This is way up above Potter. This one's even more sporty. It's all in police, only part in fire, but mostly out of fire. So go ahead, Lila. So what we did, and follow along with me. When we set the mill rates, we proposed the mill rates for area-wide. And this is area-wide services. This is libraries, traffic, the health department, OMB, the assembly, everybody. We set the mill rate at 2.54. And that's what the assembly saw on what we introduced on the 13th and what they approved on the 27th. Through this adjustment process and through the, maintaining taxing to the cap as basically preserving the tax cap, as it were, keeping to the top. Through the adjustments and keeping to the cap, we have to increase that amount for that area wide by 0.07. In area-wide, there are actually 3 separate funding programs in area-wide. One of them is basically the Fund 101, which is area-wide, supports the things I mentioned, library, library, parks, transit, this building, traffic, planning, everything that's kind of an area-wide service. So that equals 2.61 mils. But there are 2 other services in a separate fund that are area-wide. One of them is area-wide EMS lease. Last year, the voters approved for the fire department to approve an increase or a separate fund in area-wide to pay for EMS technology, if you remember that, right? So that was a voter-approved so that's a separate area-wide fund, so that's 0.02. And then the voters approved another one. This one's area-wide, but separate, specifically for APD police. This is the CAD, the body cameras. They added that. So we have to add that to the new area-wide number. The sum of those 2 is 0.06. So when you look at the mill levy for area-wide, when you include the 101, the 103, and the 107, so police, or excuse me, all the things I mentioned, then you add the EMS, the new mill levy for area-wide is 2.67. So that everybody is going to pay, no matter where you live. That's the new mill levy. So then do you folks follow along so far? Am I going too slow, too fast? I can't see hands, but hopefully you're following along.
Nobody's got their hand raised, Lance. I think everybody is following. Thank you.
And I think as BAC members, your understanding of what we've done, because we did affect the mill levy, I think you may get questions, and you're either going to say, yeah, I know what they're talking about, but I don't understand it, call Lance, rather than I have no idea what you're talking about, call Lance. So I would prefer that if you have some sense of what we did and why we did it, you're aware. So the next piece is an example. So what we did for Girdwood, and we had a meeting with the Girdwood Board of Supervisors last Friday, and this is an illustration for what we did to for Girdwood when we set their mill rates. So I just explained, if you look to the left, you see basically a description of Girdwood Valley is the tax district. And if you look across the top, when we basically gave the assembly, when they approved the mill levies, basically what happened is we had the 101 fund, which would have been 2.61. We talked about that. If you look the third column over, you see 101, 103, and 107. You see that at the top? The sum of those 3 equals 2.67. So I mentioned every single tax district, no matter where you live, is going to pay an area-wide made up of those 3 things, 2.67. Moving over to the right, Girdwood, you will see in the pink, Girdwood sets its own mill levy based on how they want to spend. They have a maximum amount of 6.0 mils that they have the authority to tax themselves to. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors figures that out. They just tell us what it is. It's for roads, it's for parks, it might be for some special contracting. It is what they tell us it is. So moving over to the next gray is the sum of 2.67 and 5.07. That's their total amount of mill levy. That doesn't include any school district stuff. It doesn't include any Eagle River stuff, and it does include any road service, limited road service. So moving over, let's go over to the school district. So the school district's mill levy, keep going, Lila, one more over. That 8.47 should look somewhat familiar. In the previous presentation, I showed you what the school district's mill levy would be for operating and bond. The sum of their 2 is 8.47. So if you add up general government, the 7.2 8.74, and the school district's 8.84. Without the adjustment, their mill levy, their total mill levy would be 16.21. Last year, their total mill levy was 12.93. It would have been a hell of a jump for them. So here's what we did. I'm going to ask Lila to go back to the right, to the left. There you go. No, I'm sorry, it's not the slide. So on the left-hand side, you see it says first responder relief. You see a number there, and then you see 1.14. That 1.14 is the equivalent amount of relief that those of us that sit in the police and fire service area, that is the equivalent amount that we will have seen in our break in our tax bill in mill levies. Does that make sense? So instead of having that cost to us, we were relieved of that expense and represented in a mill levy amount. Similarly, the amount of benefit, if you will, that we are going to receive if you live in the police service area is 1.48 mils. So for those of us that are in the police and fire service area, our tax bill is going to see a relief of about 2.62 mils. That's going to offset our area-wide mill rate. So between the two, we're not going to see a big jump since we're in all three areas. But if you were in Girdwood, you would not see that relief. So what we're going to do is we are manually going to apply it. And so what we do is when we manually apply it to Girdwood, because they are outside police and fire, their new mill rate for area-wide, we're going to start with 2.67. We're going to give them a credit. I mean, their mill rate's still going to be 2.67. We're going to give them a credit on their tax bill of 2.62. At the end of the day, their area-wide mill rate would be, for Girdwood, is going to be 0.05. Everything else stays the same. So their new adjusted mill rate for 21, Lila's going to move over to the right, the last gray column. And so you're going to see that their total tax bill is now going to be 13.59. Now, I mean, obviously there's things in area-wide that went up just through natural adjustments, just costs or things like that. Everybody is going to experience that. But for Girdwood, this was the, for lack of a better word, forced manual fix one time to provide some fair and equitableness to everybody in the municipality, because we didn't want particular tax districts to be burdened or overburdened because they weren't in those areas that received that tax benefit from first responder payroll. So we didn't have to do it, but when we did do it, there were certain tax districts, most tax districts, that saw that benefit. So we went back and looked at all of the other tax districts. There's like another dozen, but except there's Girdwood, and I'm gonna ask Lila to go to the next slide. So this is a summary. So Girdwood Valley, we talked about, they're gonna, and these are some of the other tax districts. There's, I think, one more on here that I didn't put in the illustration, and it's in Chugiak, but it's a similar fire service area. They're gonna they're in a Chugiak fire service area, but I didn't show it on this graphic, but they'll see it as well. But here's what's happening. Here's 12 of them, or 11 of them. Girdwood Valley, we just talked about. Again, they're going to start off with 2.67. We're going to give them a 2.62 relief. Their total mill levy is going to be 0.05. We have a section of the municipality tax districts that's outside the municipality. They are not in APD. They are not in fire. And it's primarily along Turnagain Arm, but they have a small Turnagain Arm police service area, but it's not the APD service area. So we include all of that. Their benefit's going to be the same. So hopefully they'll be the same. And then the rest of these, 5 through 58, These are tax districts that I mentioned that are in the police service area. So their tax bill's already going to see the benefit of the police service area. But they are not going to see, or would not have seen, the fire service area. So we manually applied it to the same assessed valuation amount to those in that service area. And then, so their new or adjusted proposed area-wide mill levy will not be 2.67. It will be 1.53. So this was, we've never done this before. We've never manually manipulated the mill rate calculation because it's basically set on a service area for services you pay for based on the tax district and those you receive. So with that recognition, sort of a once in a time, the administration, with the Assembly's support, we applied this mill rate adjustment. And then next year, assuming that we're not going to have this potentially once in a lifetime or generational influx of funds that are applied in the way in which the Treasury allowed us, in which we then did. And then similarly to those, we stepped back and said, you know what, we got to do something a little different because it would not have been, I think, fair and reasonable, if not equitable. So this is what we did. And for the purposes I stated. I hope that made sense. I will tell you I think the right thing to do. Obviously, we're manipulating the box, but we did it with a particular purpose in mind, and hopefully with a reasonable, equitable, positive outcome. And so last 5 days have been all about this, trying to figure out how to make it right, how to make it legal, how to make it fair. And so thanks to some help from a lot of folks, this is where we ended up. So I think that's it on this one. It's a lot to talk about, but I just want you to be aware of what we did, because we didn't just, at the end of the day, rely on the output of the machine. Thanks, Lila. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Lance, we have a question from Lindsay.
Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks to the chair. My question is, like when you say that it's fair and equitable, I'm just curious because for the people who have police and fire, aren't those people incrementally paying more every year to begin with?
Well, you would be, but it wouldn't be, you would be, but you would be because of police and fire services going up. So in your mill rate for your police and fire, let's say, so we increase the cost of police, or we buy something for fire, not related to COVID or CARES, okay? You're automatically going to see, you are going to see that adjustment. The benefit you are receiving is only related to the first responder payroll that we directly applied. So if you are outside of Girdwood, you're not paying the increase for the police, fire, for the, regular things inside the service area. Because for those regular things that are not related to first responder payroll, they are not receiving the benefit of, but you are. So that is why the mill rate for inside the police service area might go up a little bit for police and fire, but it's not going to go up as much because of the direct application directly related to the offset of first responder payroll. So we're only applying the benefit of the offset. We are not directing them the cost. So Girdwood area folks are not paying that incremental cost increase to the service areas for police and fire, separate from the CARES funds. We're only just giving them the benefit to the offset of first responder payroll. And so that took some time to figure out what that was. We had to divide the cost of the first responder with the cost of the police service area, how much of your tax bill is being influenced by things not relevant to first responder payroll, set that aside, and then just look at the part that's being influenced from the benefit in the form of a mill rate, and then apply only that to those other areas. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm tracking. I think what's like confusing to me is just like looking like, for example, the Girdwood Valley, they don't, they're outside the police and fire area, and they get the greatest offset versus people who just have one or the other don't get the same amount of offset. But I see what you're saying. Go ahead.
But they actually kind of do. So if you live in Glen Alps, the difference between someone who lives in Glen Alps and me who lives in Sand Lake, in Sand Lake, on my property bill, I'm already automatically going to get the benefit of police and fire because I'm in both. But Glen Alps, they're automatically going to get the benefit of APD in their tax bill. So area-wide is only partially going to be offset because the APD is automatically going to be applied. But they didn't get the full benefit because fire wasn't. So we're only applying the part that wasn't automatically benefited to them, which was the fire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you. That's a very important point. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you.
This was a fun 5 days, I'll have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen. I can't see anyone's hands. I can just see. So that was a lot, and I consumed a lot of time. So I'm done.
That was a great question, Lindsay. Really appreciate you asking it. Any other questions for Lance on this or any of the topics that he covered today? So you covered a lot of topics, Lance. Really appreciate it.
I told you to buckle in and get your coffee or your Jolt or whatever it is that keeps you going through BAC meetings. Thank you.
And then we've got on the, so I'm not seeing any hands. Let me double check here. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is just kind of I'm sorry, department reviews. I tried to skip ahead before and so we're back to department reviews. Lance, do you have comments on that?
Yeah, I'm going to start scheduling those. Carolyn has selected 3 departments. I can't remember which ones they were, but she selected 3 departments that weren't selected before. She picked me. So I got to brush up on my presentation skills. I can't remember the other ones when Carolyn picked. So she picked development services, and then OMB and real estate. And real estate we did last year, so we'll get Carolyn lined up. So that'll be all new for Anna, Carolyn, and James. I'm going to start scheduling those. I'm going to be upfront with you guys. I have a list of department heads that I know that are retiring. And I just can't even tell you what's going to happen on July or in the next week. So I think I'm going to get those going and here's the reason why. Even if there's a change in directors and all of that, I'm going to get who I got. Because you're still going to have Marilyn, Christine, or Courtney, and you're still going to have the budget coordinators in those departments. I think it's important for you to understand how they're made and what's important, what makes them tick. As they come up with their priorities and how the new administration and how potentially a new director comes in and might want to massage that for 22, I'm not going to wait for all of that to happen. I'm just going to get that stuff going. Because I also know that July might be a little bit people leaving. It'll be difficult to get organized. And so I'm going to try and get that going as soon as I can. So individually, I'll be working with you to find out your calendars based on those. And Lila is basically going to help keep that organized because it's going to be a lot, but we'll get you going. So start looking for some invitations. And if you know right away, I'll have Lila maybe help me know who's not going to be available at which time and we'll stay away. So just start looking for that stuff and probably as early as the week of May 17th.
Thank you, Lance. Okay. Any questions on that one?
Sorry, it's Lindsay. I have a question. So regardless, there's going to be a new administration at the city. And so is there a way to maybe streamline this process so that it could be part of I don't know if each department has to do a transition memo or something like that, but just to sort of rather than add to what they have to do, help streamline that process.
Through the chair, Lindsay, you were thinking the same thing I am. I just don't know what the anticipation or the requirements are, but I will be really surprised if there's not some level of transition document. This is what's in play. This is what I would like to do differently. And yeah, I suspect there'll be some template. If I were an incoming administration, I would want one template, apply it to everybody so that I'm doing it that way. And yeah, that's I think definitely a valuable tool for all departments and to the BAC. Yep.
All right, thank you. So we have other under let's see, informational reports. Do we have any other informational reports? I didn't think we did.
The only thing I raised when I put that on there, Madam Chair, is if there was something that you and maybe Mr. King or maybe Mr. Nolan wanted to mention. You guys were working on something with a contractor with the assembly regarding the rescue. I don't know if you wanted to share anything with that or maybe wait till another time. That's why I put it on there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I can, and Nolan and Jonathan, feel free to unmute and weigh in, but we did get a report back looking at kind of a bit of a gap analysis of what is being covered by the ARPA funds and kind of the guidance that's available at the moment. Yeah, Anna too. Thank you, Nolan. Thank you. And so I know I'm still going through it. Nolan, I believe, though, you had a meeting on Friday. Do you want to make any comments, or Anna, Jonathan, anybody want to share anything related to that?
Madam Chair, the meeting on Friday. Sorry, what is that?
That's okay. I wasn't able to attend, and so I thought I thought Marissa.
It was canceled. Sorry,
Okay.
There was going to be a meeting with Felix Rivera, and it was canceled. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's quite all right. So I was thinking though that gap analysis was something that we could share with the BAC as a whole. So especially for Carolyn, and we were asked by the assembly to essentially provide guidance on how they might spend the ARPA funds. And so we've kind of provided some general guidelines of our thought process on it, looking at, and Lance mentioned this earlier, what are the things that weren't completely funded that we still need funded related to CARES, or that we still have an ongoing need and is kind of still rises to the level of an emergency. We need to handle these things now. And then for things that don't fall into that category, we have quite a bit of time. So we're just encouraging them to be thoughtful and take the time to really look at what we could be doing with these funds and what's allowed within ARPA and those sorts of things. So that's what the document tries to speak to. And what are the broad categories that are being covered in under ARPA and things like that. So that was my thought, was to share that out. I wanted to make sure with the assembly that was something that we can share, but I think we can because they've specifically asked for our feedback and whatnot. And that was why I was asking Lance if we know any timelines on when the assembly wants to make decisions related to ARPA. I know they're under great pressure to make some decisions and spend at least some money quickly. And so they're trying to balance the being thoughtful with the funds, but also spending money quickly on immediate needs. Any Anna, Nolan, Jonathan, anything to add to that?
Nothing here. That was a great summary.
Okay, thank you. So I will double check again that Assembly Member Rivera is comfortable with us sharing that out, and then I can go ahead and share that with Lila to get it shared out to everybody. I think next on our agenda is audience participation, and I can't tell if we have anybody from the audience, but I'll go ahead and mute myself, and if there's anyone who from the audience who wants to participate, we'll give you, I think it's 3 minutes.
Madam Chair, just to let you know, Lila and I did not see anybody join that's not a BAC member, so I don't think that we have any anyone calling in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I noticed that there was someone on here listed as guest, and I just wasn't sure who that might be. So, okay, well, we will move right on to open discussion. So we don't have a ton of time, but just open the floor briefly to if anybody's got anything kind of percolating that you'd like to discuss, bring up with the group, etc. Okay. Well, this, I mean, the sun's out. We can we can always end a few minutes early. So the next scheduled meeting is June 3rd, and we wanted to request and see if folks were open to moving it to June 10th. And then also wanted to float the idea of we have in the past taken kind of a month off, and sometimes it's June, sometimes it's July, sometimes August. And so we wanted to put that out there as well for folks about maybe taking the July meeting off. Any comments, questions, suggestions about all that?
I'll add a couple comments. We did take a doodle poll about the June 3rd to the 10th. I think I can get most everybody there. Lila can remind me. We do have a couple BAC members that are not able to do that. And I'm asking that because I'm actually going to be out of town on the 2nd, and I don't know if I'm going to be back on the 3rd. And I don't want to schedule it and then not be here. So that's why, so I think we'll go ahead and move that one to the 10th. And Lila can remind me, I can't remember who was not able to attend, and whoever that was, my apologies.
Jonathan and Tasha.
Jonathan and Tasha, okay, Tasha, okay. The July one, yes, that week, if you guys, it's up to you. From a budget perspective, I don't think I'm gonna have much to share. Andy, I don't know if he's gonna have much to share. He's gonna, I mean, where we'll be in the process is we'll be starting to, get our feet set down on how the new administration wants to build 22. I don't really think I'm gonna have much to share. Well, I guess we can weigh that in June. So anyway, yeah.
Okay. Nolan?
Yeah, one thing I was going to mention regarding the summer meetings, I know I wasn't much help on the not much to say yet on the gap analysis and the funding questions, but I do think that there we'll probably end up having a lot to talk about, once we have more time to review that, especially those of us that have been focused on that, and that could be, we could end up having a pretty full plate as far as stuff to think about, between our departmental stuff, but also with ARPA. Spending decisions, where we could have a good influence. That might be something to think about too. If we're thinking about taking a summer break, we might also have a lot of stuff that could be acted upon, in a short time. So it might make sense to even think about a work session somewhere in there, something like that.
I like that idea. I'm interested to hear from other folks about maybe July isn't kind of our normal formal meeting, but is instead we use the time as a work session to discuss this and try and come up with, what input do we want to have on ARPA and things like that. Any thoughts from other folks?
This is Lindsay. I think that sounds good. I definitely with keeping in mind scheduling with the departments starting in May 17th, it would be nice to have that later June meeting as well to be able to do that report out. So hopefully that works out, and then support the work session in July.
Awesome. And maybe we can get a doodle poll going for a July meeting as well to see when that works. Because I know the first might not be a great, we've discussed that might not be a great time just because of the holiday and whatnot. So Lila, I don't know if you're able to get a doodle poll going for a July work session, and any other comments before we adjourn?
I just want to thank you guys for listening to all of that. That was a lot to digest. And again, if you have questions, let me know. And welcome, Carolyn, to the BAC.
Thank you. Yes, we're very excited to have you, Carolyn.
And Carl,
thank you,
to you as well. Congratulations on your seat on the school board, and we'll look forward to having you join us on the VAC meetings. So thank you for jumping in today. Appreciate that.
Very much so. And Lance, thanks for putting on the Lance show. We really appreciate it. It was great. It's a ton of information. Really appreciate it. I know I'm going to have some questions. I already shot one email off to you to
Okay.
take it as a side note. Yeah, thank you so much. With that, if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Nolan.
Second?
Second, this is Carla.
Thank you, Carla.
Thanks, Carla. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.